Okay, so here's how we teach our first lesson. Basically, this is a good dip into the water of how our method works. So we're going to start with this cross. This cross we call it the compass. It's a little bit low tech, high IQ, and it's not the most precise instrument in the world, but it does roughly get you to where you need to go. So we'll start like this with the cross. At the top of the cross, we'll put "I play," and we'll ask the learner when. And the most common example, the most common response will be now, present. You say, yeah, but it's not really present because it's more of a habit and a routine. If we want to talk about present, we'll use the form I am playing. And generally, they'll say, oh, yeah, fine. We're going to hammer that home. We're going to really hammer that home with the example of a phone call. This is our first analogy, let's say. We'll say, if I call you and I say, what are you doing? And you say, I play football. I'll say, okay, great. I imagine at home you've got a couple of medals and a pair of football boots. But if I call you and I say, what are you doing? And you say, I'm playing, I can imagine that you're on the pitch with your Bluetooth in. Okay, so we make this difference. Often, especially Latin languages, don't always use a massive difference between these two. So it's good to hammer this home. Then we go straight into I will play. Okay, will is the word for the future. You put whatever verb you want after it, and we're talking in the future. So I will play. Then we go into the past, and we'll just give them the verb and say plus ed. We'll adjust the pronunciation slightly and say it's apostrophe d. So I played instead of I played. But hammer home that you can take any verb and add ed and just go. A point to make here, this wouldn't be something we'd say necessarily in the lesson to the learner, but to teachers, we teach as one of our philosophies that teaching is like chess, in the sense that you can only make one move at a time. Unfortunately, you say, yeah, but if I make three moves in a row, I'll get to checkmate. You will, but unfortunately, they're not the rules, and that's not how it works. So we've got to make a move and wait for the learner to make a move, and then we can start building the game and building their learning journey. So in this case, what's the point of the analogy is that we basically don't introduce irregular verbs until about 10, 15 lessons in. We just let them use I, subject, verb plus ed. So even if it's I played, okay, great, it's regular. I redid instead of I read. Yeah, fine. One of the reasons we do that as well is it actually helps communication at the start. So if you imagine these three verbs, we've got think, fight, and teach. For a native speaker or someone who's got good experience, you can say I thought, I fought, and I taught, and I'll understand the difference, and someone will understand what you're saying. At the start, when the pronunciation isn't clean, it's actually more, it's going to create more confusion. It's going to create more problems than it solves actually using that. So we're happy at the start to let people say, I thinked, I fighted, and I teached. Because it increases your communication. It means you can start talking straight away. And also, it's much better for communication if they don't know, oh, is it regular or irregular? It's much better that someone says, okay, yesterday I bought a new pair of shoes, instead of saying, I buy, no, not buy it is irregular. How, oh, what is, you've lost the conversation before you've even started. So actually, as a concept, and our first chess move, let's say our opening gambit is, we let them make those mistakes, and it's something that we'll adjust in the future. And they'll learn the irregular verbs as time goes on anyway. So one of our favorite things to do is say straight off the bat, don't worry about irregular verbs. I play plus ed, or I verb, sorry, plus ed, and move forward. So then we'll recap this and we'll get them to say, okay, I play when, habit, regularly, generally, habits, routines. These are the key words for that verbal tense. They see ing, they understand that it's right in this moment. When they see will, they understand that it's in the future, and ed, they understand it's the past. So then we'll go through giving them a chance to give some examples. Basically, a good test to run as well is give them a new verb that you've for sure they've never heard. So I'd use something like deduce, and I say, well, it's impossible in their first lesson, especially if they're a low level. They'll never have used deduce before. So great. And they'll say, okay, generally, and they'll say, I deduce. Okay, I'm deducing. Great, I will deduce, and I deduced. Great. It just shows them, it reinforces to them that this system works, and they can start talking straight away. And again, it's not perfect, but low tech, high IQ, it'll get you roughly to where you need to go. That's why it's the compass. Okay, then we go through and we'll just start letting them flesh out the skeleton basically and get some adverbs on there, get some times on there. So we'll say next and last. Obviously, when you're teaching this, generally you'll be teaching in the person's native language to start. So in this point, you can say, okay, last means X in whatever language you're teaching, next means that. And then they can just add on days, weeks, months, hours, years, centuries, whatever they want to add. You can add it and just get them to get used to using next with the future and last with the past, which was a rhyme, but I didn't mean to. Then always, sometimes, never. Don't worry about often, every third Tuesday, be bi-weekly, all that kind of thing. It's either always or sometimes or never at the start. It's either always, sometimes or never. And then now, obviously, with the present continuous. Get them to run through examples again. So basically, one of the keys about this method as well is that it's non-linear. So we're not going to go through one topic, then another topic. We're basically going in circles all the time. And the idea behind that is if we've got, let's say, 100 meetings with a learner, we can meet them 100 times. A traditional course will focus on the easy stuff for the first 30 lessons, the intermediate stuff for the middle 40, and then the difficult stuff for the last 30. In our opinion, that's wrong because it means the most difficult stuff that takes the most practice, you got the least time to work on. So what we're trying to do is get them to do everything. We're going to stack everything at the start. So basically, we can teach all of the grammar topics in about 10 lessons. And that means if we're going to see them 100 times, we've given them the information in the first 10, and that means we've got 90 lessons now to practice everything. And also the idea of this being non-linear is important because a conversation is non-linear. Unfortunately, when conversations happen, we don't spend 5 minutes talking in the past and then 5 minutes talking in the future. It jumps around. So we're actually working on tertiary skills here as well because we're getting people used to jumping around from tense to tense. So that was a little bit of an offshoot, but okay, so we go through the adverbs. Then we're going to go through S, V, and O. A great analogy that we use here is, as the Brits love a good queue in a shop, and you can't jump the queue. No ifs, no buts, no coconuts. You're not jumping, no cuts. It's the same with the grammar. We want to see S, then first verb, second verb, or auxiliary verb, main verb, and then the object. You might have to explain to them what they are, what a subject is, what an auxiliary is. Okay, we just use V1, V2 instead of using fancy jargon words. This with people of any age. Give them an example. I will play football. This is the subject. This is the auxiliary verb. This is the main verb. And this is the object. And we'll use the analogy here and we'll say, look, it's a bit like a cake. When you're trying to create phrases in English, it's like a cake. S, V1, V2, and O are your butter, your eggs, your sugar, and your flour. If we're making a cake, we've got to get those bits right. Okay, then your information in summer, at the cinema with my friends, why, who, where, why, what, when. That's all decoration. If you get the base of the cake right, it might not be decorated perfectly, but at least it's still edible. Okay. Whereas if we start trying to play around with the order and say we mess the order up and we mess up the original recipe and the order, and then we're trying to put frosting in before our V1, it's going to be inedible. So we use that analogy. And then basically the reason we use this type of analogy as well, like the cake, is because we can recall people to their errors without actually, let's say, hammering them. So you don't have to say to a student, no, that's a mistake. Verb, subject is too much jargon. You can say, remember the cake, remember the recipe. And it should call them back to the fact that we said, remember the order. So you can, let's say, guide them instead of whipping them all the time. So we do that. One of the reasons we also teach them that at this point is because we have to change the recipe when we ask questions in English, obviously. So the V1 is going to change position with the subject. So it's important that we show them this little graphic and we say, oh, look, that's actually going to change around. And then let's get back. We're going to circle back to our compass. And we'll say, okay, we're going to start with will. So we'll give them the affirmative, I will. And ask them to make the question, to create the question. Will I? Great. Perfect. We're going to say, I am playing. Hopefully they're going to give us, am I playing? Don't worry about the fact I am, are you. We're playing chess, just one move at a time. I am playing. Then we're going to say, show them the negative as well if you want, that you just add the not in there wherever you want. Then we'll start with the present simple and say, I play. Now, ideally, they're going to say, oh, there's a problem, or they'll have a little pause, and you're going to reward the fact that they've noticed a problem. Now, they might say, play I, and you say, does that sound right? and they should say, no, not sure. Great, do. Do you play? Do I play? Whatever. Because one of the big, let's say, gripes with people learning English is they say, well, this do is everywhere and it's nowhere. I don't know what it means. In this case, you say it doesn't mean anything. It's just holding the place because what was the problem? There was no V1. There's no auxiliary verb. In the other questions, it's easy. We just take will and swap the place. In this case, we can't do that. So what we've done is we've added do, and that's what it's there to do. So our key word in the interrogative is going to be do. In questions is going to be do. And I understand you're talking 360. Now's a good time to hammer home that as well and say, and hammer that home, sorry, and say, well, so if someone says, do you eat meat, for example, what are they asking? Well, in a roundabout way, they're asking if you're vegetarian. They're not asking if you're at the table now or at a barbecue. They're asking, in general, do you have the habit to? Okay, and here we show the negative again. Then we'll show them, I played. Now, sometimes they'll say, oh, it's the, and you can say it's the same problem, isn't it? And they'll say, oh, so it's do. It is do, but it's do in the past. So it's did. And here we'll just flesh out the negatives. So here, within about 10 minutes, we've already got them speaking in general, in this moment, in the future, and in the past. And here we'll just say, right, here are 12 different verbs, or here are 4 different verbs. It depends on the level or the age of the learner as well, because we do this with everybody from primary school kids to our adults. You can use this method. Where to push and pull is with the vocab and the extra details. So in this case, if it's a young class, we'd say, okay, let's just use play and eat. We'll take 2 verbs. Give me general, the 2 presents with eat, and the past and the future with play, for example, something very, very well known. If it's somebody who's more advanced or a bit older, you can play with more verbs, essentially, and then request more information on the back of it. So this is our way in 10 minutes that we teach 4 verbal tenses in the interrogative, the affirmative, and the negative. Again, reinforcing the cake. If they want to add information, extra information, remember, you've got to give us the core ingredients first, then you can decorate your cake. This is another one of our concepts that we use as well as one of our teaching pillars. We've got chess, remembering to play 1 move at a time, and remember also to play at the level of we shouldn't try and see them as an opponent. So let's say they're essentially a teammate. They're playing against us, but it's still collaborative. So we're 2 sides of the same coin with the chess analogy. If you're playing a complete beginner, you can't start talking about, I'm going to use the Sicilian French style game or whatever it is. You're going to have to play to their level, a little bit above their level to bring them on, but you're going to have to, be humble enough to make rookie mistakes yourself when teaching them to invite them to grow. And this moves on and kind of goes with one of our other concepts, which is here, which is it takes 2 to tango. If you haven't got your learner willing to be led by you, and they're not willing to dance with you, they're never gonna grow anyway. So one of the first things to do is put all of the how good you are back onto them. So the key here would be, in this concept, would be you've given them this framework, let's say, of the first, which is obviously just the first part of the framework. 4 verbal tenses in interrogative, affirmative, and negative. Let's get them to give as many examples as possible, and basically everything's okay. You want them going away after the first lesson thinking, oh, I'm not actually as bad as English. I'm not as bad at English as I thought I was. And they should be able to see already after the first lesson, people will be going away seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. So this is obviously the most basic part of what we do. This is our first framework and our first lesson.